The news came through on a cold Tuesday morning, transmitted across 47 light-years in a burst of quantum-encrypted data that took 3 seconds to decrypt and 30 more to believe. The colony on Terra Nova, all 16,000 souls, had been wiped out. Not by some natural disaster or equipment failure, but deliberately, systematically, by the Kethran Concordat's Third Fleet. Men, women, children. The message included footage. Command made the mistake of watching it first. By noon, it had leaked to every major network on Earth. I was in my apartment in Chicago when my phone started buzzing with emergency alerts. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Webb, Reserve Fleet, report for immediate activation. I hadn't worn the uniform in 6 years. Not since the treaty was signed, and humanity decided to play nice with the other species in this corner of the galaxy. We'd bent over backward to prove we weren't the monsters they feared. We'd accepted trade restrictions that crippled our economy. We'd allowed inspectors on our military installations. We'd smiled and nodded while the Kethrans, the Volturi Collective, and the Seolian Empire treated us like children who'd just discovered fire. All because 60 years ago, when we first broke through the barrier and met the galactic community, they saw our history and recoiled. The wars, the genocides, the atomic fire. They looked at humanity and saw demons wearing skin. So we'd spent 6 decades trying to prove them wrong. Building bridges, sharing technology, keeping our warships in dock, and our soldiers on a leash. I turned on the news while I packed my duffel. The footage was everywhere now. Bodies in the streets of New Providence, the capital city. Scorch marks on the residential towers where the Kethran bombardment had carved through walls like tissue paper. They'd landed troops afterward. The analysts were already confirming it from the footage, going building to building. The Kethrans had wanted to make sure. Wanted it personal. The broadcaster's voice cracked as she described what they were seeing. She was young, probably thought she'd spend her career covering political summits and economic reports. Instead, she was narrating the end of innocence. They were showing interviews now with people on the street. I watched a man in his 50s, tears streaming down his face, talking about his daughter who'd moved to Terra Nova 3 years ago to teach. He'd just gotten a message from her last week. She was pregnant. First grandchild. I zipped my bag and headed for the door, but not before I caught the tail end of an interview with some Volturi diplomat. He was offering condolences, naturally, calling it a tragedy, promising a full investigation. The word investigation made my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth would crack. Investigate what? We had footage. We had survivors. Exactly 12 of them. Off-world when it happened. We had the Kethran ships on long-range sensors, fleeing back toward their territory. The streets were different on my way to the recruitment center. Quiet in a way that felt wrong for a Tuesday afternoon. People were gathered in clusters, staring at phones, at public screens. I saw a woman sitting on a bench, just sobbing. A stranger had his arm around her shoulder. I saw men with faces like stone, the kind of expression that comes before violence. The anger was building. You could taste it in the air like ozone before a lightning strike. The recruitment center was mobbed. The line stretched around the block. Men and women, young and old, some in business suits, some in work clothes, all waiting to sign up. A kid who couldn't have been more than 18 stood in front of me, his hands shaking as he gripped the enlistment form someone had handed out. I heard him tell his friend that his cousin was on Terra Nova. Was. Past tense. That's how fast it happened. 16,000 people reduced to past tense. Inside, the processing officer looked exhausted, and it wasn't even 1400 hours yet. She scanned my ID, pulled up my file, and nodded. "You're reactivated, Commander. Report to Great Lakes Naval Station by 2200 tonight. Transport's being arranged." She paused, met my eyes. "They're calling up everyone. Every mothballed ship, every reserve unit. This is it. I knew what she meant. This is it. The moment we'd been dreading, and maybe some dark part of me whispered, waiting for. Proof that playing nice was never going to work. That the other species were never going to see us as equals, only as threats to be managed or eliminated when convenient. I grabbed a coffee at a shop near the train station. The TV mounted in the corner was showing the emergency session of the United Earth Parliament. The Prime Minister was speaking, his face gray with grief and rage. "We extended the hand of friendship," he said, "and they have answered with the blood of our children. This will not stand. Humanity will have justice." The word justice rang hollow. We all knew what he meant, what we all meant now. The mask was slipping. No, it was being torn away. On the train to the base, I sat next to an old man who'd been reading the news on his tablet. He looked at my duffel, at the military ID clipped to my jacket, and nodded. "Give them hell, son," he said quietly. His eyes were wet. My grandson was on Terra Nova, 7 years old. They got him in his school. He turned back to his tablet, but his hands were shaking. I wanted to say something, offer some comfort, but there was nothing. Words were ashes. The base was chaos when I arrived. Thousands of personnel flooding in, cargo haulers moving equipment, officers shouting orders. I reported to my assignment, tactical operations aboard the UES Retribution, one of the heavy carriers we'd kept in reserve. The name felt prophetic now. As I walked through the corridors to my station, I passed crews working around the clock, weapon systems being brought online, munitions loaded, fighters prepped. In the ready room, I met my new team. 15 officers, all reactivated reserves like me, all wearing the same expression, grim determination mixed with something else. Something we'd kept buried for 60 years while we played the role of reformed monsters. The captain came in, a woman named Admiral Rodriguez, who'd made her name in the skirmishes before the treaty. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You've seen the footage," she said. "You know what happened. The Kethran government is claiming it was a rogue fleet commander acting without authorization. They're offering to hand him over for trial." She paused, her lip curling. Command's response was simple. "We don't want one commander. We want accountability. We want reparations. We want guarantees this never happens again." Another pause. They refused, said we were being unreasonable, that we should accept their justice system. Someone laughed, a bitter sound. Rodriguez nodded. "Exactly. So here we are. Fleet Command has authorized Operation Reckoning. We're going in." She activated the holo display. Star charts appeared, showing Kethran territory. 16 colonies, 16 for 16. We're going to show them what humanity does when you massacre our families." The room was silent. 16 colonies. Millions of Kethrans. I felt something twist in my gut. Not quite guilt, not quite hesitation. More like the recognition of a line being crossed that could never be uncrossed. But then I thought about that footage. The bodies, the children, the grandfather on the train with shaking hands. The briefing continued for another hour. But the essential truth was already clear. Humanity was done asking permission, done explaining ourselves, done apologizing for existing. The Kethrans had made their choice when they turned Terra Nova into a graveyard, and now they would learn what that choice cost. Admiral Rodriguez walked us through the tactical overview. The Kethran Concordat controlled 42 star systems, with their major population centers concentrated in 16 colonial worlds, radiating out from their homeworld, Kethra Prime. Their military was formidable by galactic standards, heavy cruisers with plasma lance batteries, fighter squadrons that could operate in atmospheric and void combat, and orbital defense platforms that ringed every major world. On paper, they outgunned us. They had better shields, faster-than-light drives that could jump twice the distance of ours, and energy weapons that didn't rely on primitive kinetic ammunition. On paper. But paper never accounted for human ingenuity born from desperation and rage. "The Kethrans think they know us," Rodriguez said, her finger tracing a path through the holographic star map. "They've seen our old ships, the ones we showed them during the treaty negotiations. Slow, bulky carriers, railgun batteries that take 30 seconds to cycle, fighters that can't match their maneuverability." She smiled. And it was not a pleasant expression. "They haven't seen what we've been building in the dark." She pulled up new schematics. Ships that looked nothing like our old fleet. Sleeker, meaner, wrapped in composite armor that our weapons labs had been perfecting in secret for 20 years. Stealth frigates that could mask their signatures well enough to get within knife-fighting range before unleashing hell. Drone swarms. Thousands of autonomous fighters that didn't need pilots, didn't need life support, didn't hesitate. And the weapons. God, the weapons. "We've been playing by galactic rules," Rodriguez continued. "No kinetic bombardment of population centers, no nuclear weapons in space, no biological agents, no artificial intelligence in weapon systems." She let that hang in the air. The Kethrans just violated every one of those rules when they slaughtered Terra Nova. So here's the new policy from Command. There are no rules anymore. We're going to hit them with everything we kept locked away because it was too cruel, too efficient, too human. I felt a chill run through me, and I wasn't alone. Lieutenant Foster, sitting 2 seats down, was a soft-spoken woman who'd spent her civilian years as a teacher. She raised her hand. "Admiral, are we talking about civilian targets?" Rodriguez met her eyes. "We're talking about proportional response. 16 colonies. We're going to evacuate who we can, give them time to flee, and then we're going to render those worlds uninhabitable. Not by killing everyone, we're not them, but by destroying their infrastructure so completely that they can't sustain their populations. Power generation, water treatment, food production, transportation networks, gone. They'll have to evacuate millions of their own people, become refugees in their own space. They'll understand what it means to lose your home." Another officer, a grizzled commander named Patterson who'd seen action in the early days, spoke up. "And if they don't evacuate, if they try to keep their civilians in place as human shields?" The Admiral's expression hardened. "Then they're making the same choice they made for our people on Terra Nova. We're not going to murder children in their beds. That's what separates us from them. But we're not going to be held hostage by their tactics either. We give them 48 hours per world. After that, the infrastructure goes down whether they've left or not." The weight of it settled on all of us. This was war. Real war, not the sanitized peacekeeping operations we'd been part of before. This was the kind of conflict humanity had waged against itself for millennia, now turned outward against an alien civilization that had made the fatal mistake of thinking we'd evolved past our nature. After the briefing, I headed to my quarters, a small cabin I'd share with another officer during the deployment. On the way, I passed through one of the observation corridors that looked out over the launch bays. The activity was staggering. Hundreds of ships being prepped simultaneously. I recognized some of the older models, carriers and destroyers from the active fleet, but there were new ones too. The stealth frigates Rodriguez had mentioned, painted in light-absorbing black that seemed to drink in the hangar lights. Heavy cruisers with railgun arrays that looked like they could punch through a moon. And in the far bay, something massive under construction, surrounded by work crews and fabrication drones. "That's the Ragnarok," someone said beside me. I turned to see a young ensign, maybe 25, staring out at the massive vessel. Dreadnought class, first of its kind. They've been building it in secret for 8 years, supposed to be the flagship for Operation Reckoning. I studied the ship. It dwarfed everything around it, 1 kilometer long and bristling with weapon emplacements. "How long until it's operational?" 3 days. the ensign said. "They're working triple shifts. Admiral Chen is going to command it personally." He glanced at me. "My brother was on Terra Nova. He was a mining engineer, got married last year." The past tense again. Was. I put my hand on his shoulder, squeezed once, and kept walking. In my quarters, I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut down. I kept thinking about the path that had brought us here. 60 years ago, humanity had burst into the galactic community like a bull in a china shop. We'd developed faster than light travel through sheer bloody-minded determination, cracking the physics that had taken other species centuries to master. We'd done it in decades, driven by the same competitive fire that had taken us from the first airplane to the moon in 66 years. When we made first contact with the Volturi Collective, it had been a disaster. They'd hailed us, expected diplomatic protocols we'd never heard of, and we'd responded with confusion and aggressive posturing, because that's what we did. Within a year, we'd been branded as dangerous primitives. The galactic community had united against us, threatened to quarantine our entire system if we didn't submit to their oversight. So we'd bent the knee, accepted their terms, let them inspect our weapons, monitor our communications, treat us like criminals on parole. And for 60 years, we'd endured it. Built relationships slowly, proved we could be trusted. Some of us even believed we'd actually become better, that we'd left behind the savage history that made the aliens fear us. Terra Nova had shattered that illusion. The Kethrans had attacked a civilian colony, not a military target, and the galactic community's response had been tepid at best. Investigations, diplomatic pressure, sanctions that would take years to have any effect. The message was clear: humanity's blood was cheap. We could be killed with impunity because enforcing real consequences might upset the balance of power. Well, we were about to upset that balance ourselves. My comm unit buzzed. Fleet-wide message from the Commander-in-Chief. I pulled it up on my tablet. The President's face appeared, and he looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 24 hours. "To all personnel of the United Earth Fleet," he began. "In 12 hours, we launch Operation Reckoning. I want you to understand what you're fighting for. Not revenge, though God knows we've earned it. Not conquest. We're fighting for the simple principle that humanity will not be terrorized, that our people will not be slaughtered without consequence, that we have the right to exist and defend ourselves with every tool at our disposal." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was raw with emotion. 60 years ago, we agreed to limit ourselves because we wanted to be part of something larger. We wanted to prove we were civilized. But civilization is a two-way street. It requires mutual respect, mutual protection. The Kethrans violated that compact when they murdered 16,000 of our brothers and sisters. So now we remind the galaxy who we are. Not the monsters they feared, but not the victims they thought they could abuse either. We are humanity. We survive, we adapt, and when pushed, we push back harder than anyone imagined possible. The message ended. I sat in the dark of my quarters, listening to the thrum of the ship's systems coming online around me. In 12 hours, we'd jump into Kethran space. In 12 hours, we'd cross a threshold that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. I thought about the grandfather on the train, the ensign in the corridor, the woman sobbing on the bench. I thought about 16,000 people who went to sleep one night on a colony world and never woke up. And I thought about what we were about to do. The colonies we'd devastate, the refugees we'd create, the Kethrans who would lose everything even if they survived. It should have troubled me more than it did. Maybe in the years to come, it would. But right now, all I felt was a cold determination. They had dropped the mask first. The launch happened at 0400 hours, and I'll never forget the sight of it. 500 warships burning out of Earth's orbit simultaneously, their engines creating a constellation of blue-white fire that turned the night sky incandescent. I watched from the bridge of the Retribution as we joined the formation, our massive carrier surrounded by a screen of destroyers and frigates. Around us, the fleet organized itself into battle groups, each assigned to one of the 16 Kethran target worlds. Our battle group, Task Force 7, consisted of 40 ships centered around the Retribution and her sister carrier, the Vengeance. Our target was Kethras III, an agricultural colony world with a population of 800,000. Not a military target. That was the point. The Kethrans needed to understand that they'd opened a door they couldn't close, that the rules of engagement they'd shattered couldn't be pieced back together with apologies and investigations. The jump to FTL was always disorienting, like having your entire body pulled through a straw while your mind lagged 3 seconds behind. Most of the crew had taken anti-nausea meds, but some of the newer personnel still ended up heaving into bags. I'd done it enough times that I just gritted my teeth and waited for the sensation to pass. When it did, we were traveling faster than light, crossing the distance that would take 47 years at sublight speeds in just under 30 hours. The first few hours of the journey were spent on final preparations. I was assigned to tactical coordination, which meant I spent my time running simulations with the other officers, gaming out scenarios for how the Kethrans might respond. The prevailing theory was that they wouldn't. Not at first. They'd assume we were coming to negotiate, to posture, maybe to seize one of their listening posts in some symbolic gesture of outrage. They couldn't imagine we'd actually attack their colonies. It violated every treaty we'd signed, every principle we'd claimed to uphold. That was their mistake. They'd confused restraint with weakness, civilization with passivity. They'd forgotten that humanity had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain, not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we were the most ruthlessly adaptable predators the planet had ever produced. We'd just been hiding that nature behind a veneer of diplomacy. Lieutenant Foster found me in the tactical center during my second shift. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "Can't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head. "Keep thinking about my students. I taught middle school history before I got called up. 12 and 13-year-olds. Some of them probably have family on those Kethran worlds we're about to hit." She sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "We're going to make children homeless, Thomas. We're going to destroy the lives of people who had nothing to do with Terra Nova." I didn't insult her with easy answers. She deserved better than that. "Yeah," I said. "We are, and it's going to haunt some of us for the rest of our lives. But here's the question I keep coming back to. What's the alternative? We file a complaint with the Galactic Council? Wait 10 years for them to issue a strongly worded condemnation? Let the Kethrans know they can murder us whenever it's convenient and face no real consequences? There has to be something between doing nothing and destroying 16 colonies," she said. "You'd think so," I agreed. But nobody's offered a third option that would actually work. The Kethrans understand power. They made a calculation that humanity was weak enough to attack. Now we have to make them recalculate. I pulled up a file on my console, one that had been making the rounds among the crew. "You seen this?" It was an intelligence report, compiled over the past 24 hours by our xenopsychology teams. The Kethrans were a predator species, evolved from pack hunters on a world with scarce resources. Their entire culture was built around hierarchy and dominance. They'd expanded across the stars by subjugating weaker species, by proving themselves willing to use overwhelming force. When they'd joined the Galactic Council, it wasn't out of some enlightened cooperation. It was because they'd met species powerful enough to make conquest too costly. "They respect strength," I said. "That's it. That's their entire moral framework. When we spent 60 years trying to prove we were peaceful, they didn't see enlightenment. They saw prey trying not to get eaten, Terra Nova was them testing whether we'd actually fight back or just bleat for the Council to protect us. Foster read through the report, her expression growing darker. So this is who we're dealing with. They're never going to understand mercy or proportionality or any of the values we tried to show them. Not until we speak a language they comprehend, I said. Violence, consequences, the understanding that attacking humanity costs more than it's worth. I closed the file. I don't like it either, but I like the alternative less. The alternative is Terra Nova happening again and again, because why wouldn't it? We've shown that human blood is free. She was quiet for a long moment. When this is over, when we've destroyed those 16 colonies, do you think they'll get it? Or will this just escalate until one of our species is extinct? That was the question keeping the admirals up at night. The worry that we were starting something that couldn't be contained, that would end with either humanity exterminated or the Kethrans broken beyond recovery. I think, I said carefully, that we're about to find out if the Kethrans have the same survival instinct we do, the ability to recognize when they've miscalculated and adjust before it's too late. The intercom crackled. All personnel, we exit FTL in 6 hours. Battle stations in 5 hours, 30 minutes. This is not a drill. Foster stood up. I should get some sleep. Or try to. She paused at the door. Thomas, when we do this, when we give them the 48 hours to evacuate, do you think they will? I don't know, I admitted, but we're going to give them the chance. That's more than they gave Terra Nova. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. The crew moved through their routines with mechanical precision. Everyone focused on their specific tasks because thinking about the bigger picture would paralyze us. I reviewed targeting data, confirmed weapon system status, coordinated with the fighter squadron commanders who'd be flying cover during the operation. The Retribution carried 200 fighters, each one crewed by pilots who'd been training in secret for this exact scenario. One of them, a squadron leader named Rachel Park, stopped by Tactical for a final briefing. She was 32, had been a combat pilot before the treaty, and had spent the past 6 years flying commercial shuttles and going quietly insane with boredom. Tell me we're really doing this, she said. Tell me we're not going to get out there and then back down at the last second. We're really doing this, I confirmed. You'll be flying escort for the bomber wings. Keep their fighters off our heavy assets while they take out the infrastructure targets. She grinned, and there was something fierce in her expression. I've been waiting for this. 6 years of listening to the Kethrans and Volturi talk about how we need to be controlled, how we're too dangerous to be trusted with real weapons. You know what I think? I think they were right. We are dangerous. And they just reminded us of that. Try to keep that bloodlust under control, I said. But I understood it. We all did. The rage that had been building for 60 years, every insult swallowed, every humiliation endured, every time we'd bitten our tongues while the galactic community treated us like children. Terra Nova had given us permission to stop pretending. The final hour before we dropped out of FTL, Admiral Rodriguez addressed the entire task force. Her face appeared on every screen throughout the fleet, and the usual background chatter in the tactical center went silent. In a few minutes, we're going to exit faster than light travel in the Kethras system, she said. When we do, we'll be past the point of no return. The Kethrans will know we're coming. The galaxy will be watching. What we do next will define humanity's future among the stars. She paused, and I could see the weight she was carrying. This woman had spent 30 years in uniform, fought in the skirmishes before the treaty, and then watched as humanity disarmed itself in the name of peace. Now she was leading us back into war. We're going to offer the Kethrans on that planet 48 hours to evacuate, she continued. We'll broadcast on all channels, make sure every civilian knows what's coming. After that, we start hitting targets. Power plants first, then water treatment, then the agricultural processing centers. We're going to methodically destroy everything that makes that world habitable until they have no choice but to leave." Her expression hardened. "Some of you are struggling with this. Good. That means you're still human. But don't let that struggle stop you from doing what's necessary. The Kethrans made a choice when they killed our people. Now they live with the consequences. Now they learn that humanity isn't prey. We're the apex predator they should have been too afraid to provoke." The connection cut. Around me, the bridge crew sat in tense silence. Then, the FTL countdown began. 10 seconds. 9, 8. The transition from FTL hit like a sledgehammer, and then we were there. Real space. The Kethra system materialized around us in a wash of sensor data. A yellow star, 6 planets, and our target hanging in the habitable zone like a blue-green jewel. Kethras 3 looked peaceful from this distance. Cloud patterns swirling across continents, city lights visible even from 30 million kilometers out. 800,000 people down there going about their lives, completely unaware that their world was about to end. The tactical display lit up immediately. "Contact!" the sensor officer called out. "Kethran defense platforms, 12 of them in high orbit. They're powering weapons." A pause. "We're being hailed. Multiple channels. They sound confused." Admiral Rodriguez's voice came through the fleet channel. "All ships, battle formation Delta. Fighter screens deploy. Weapons hot, but hold fire unless they engage first." Then to communications. "Put them through." The main screen shifted to show a Kethran officer. They were a striking species, I'd give them that. Tall and lean with features that reminded me of Earth's big cats, all sharp angles and predatory grace. This one wore the insignia of a defense coordinator, and his confusion was evident even across species lines. His mouth moved, and the translator rendered his words in flat, emotionless English. "Human vessels, you are in violation of the Treaty of Proxima. Explain your presence immediately." Rodriguez didn't blink. "We're here to deliver a message. Stand down your weapons and prepare to receive our transmission on all civilian channels." "You have no authority here," the Kethran said, his voice rising. "This is Sovereign Concordat space. You will withdraw immediately or—" "Or what?" Rodriguez cut him off. "You'll attack us like you attacked Terra Nova? You'll murder more of our civilians?" She leaned forward. "No. Those days are over. Stand down or we'll remove your platforms. You have 60 seconds to comply." The Kethran's expression cycled through emotions. Confusion, anger, then something that might have been fear. He wasn't stupid. He could see our fleet on his sensors, 500 warships that had materialized in his system like an avenging angel. His 12 defense platforms were formidable by peacetime standards, but they were designed to ward off pirates and small incursions. Not this. Not humanity dropping the mask and baring its teeth. "Platforms are standing down," the sensor officer reported. "They're backing off to minimum safe distance." "Smart," Rodriguez muttered. Then, louder. "Communications. Broadcast on all frequencies. Civilian bands, government channels, everything. I want every Kethran on that planet to hear this." The transmission went out, and Rodriguez's face appeared on screens across Kethras 3. I imagined them. 800,000 people stopping what they were doing to watch the human admiral address them. "Citizens of Kethras 3, she began. 5 days ago, vessels of the Kethran Concordat attacked and destroyed the human colony of Terra Nova. 16,000 civilians were murdered. Men, women, and children killed in their homes, in their schools, in the streets." She paused, letting that sink in. "Your government has refused to provide justice. They've offered excuses, investigations, diplomatic solutions that would take years while the murderers of our people live free. This is unacceptable. Humanity will not be terrorized. We will not watch our people slaughtered without consequence." Another pause. On the tactical display, I could see activity spiking planet-side. Emergency broadcasts lighting up, government channels going active, transportation networks suddenly flooding with traffic as people began to panic. "You have 48 hours, Rodriguez continued. 48 hours to evacuate this world. We are providing coordinates for safe passage out system. Any vessel leaving Kethras through will not be harmed. Any vessel attempting to engage our fleet will be destroyed. After 48 hours, we will begin systematic destruction of this world's infrastructure. Power generation, water treatment, food production, communications networks. Everything that makes this world habitable will be reduced to rubble." I watched the tactical display as the reality of our words hit home. The organized city lights of the capital were already changing patterns as power consumption spiked. Spaceports were lighting up like Christmas trees. They were scrambling, trying to figure out if we were serious, if humanity would actually follow through on this threat. "We are not the Kethran Concordat," Rodriguez said, and her voice carried the weight of judgment. "We will not murder you in your beds. We will not hunt down your children, but we will take from you what you took from us, your homes, your sense of safety, the assumption that you can act without consequences. You will become refugees. You will know what it means to lose everything. And perhaps, when you're living in camps on other worlds, dependent on the charity of species that pity you, you'll understand what your government did to us." The transmission ended. The silence on the bridge was absolute. We'd just declared war not in the clean, surgical way of modern conflicts, but in the ancient, brutal way that humanity had perfected over millennia. Total war. The kind where civilians suffered not as collateral damage, but as strategic targets. Not killed, but displaced, their entire civilization uprooted. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving thousands of transmissions from the surface. Requests for clarification, pleas for mercy, threats, surrender offers. It's chaos down there." "Ignore all military channels," Rodriguez ordered. "Route civilian requests to the humanitarian coordination team. If they want to evacuate, we help them, but the clock is running." The next 48 hours became a surreal nightmare of organized catastrophe. The Kethrans, to their credit, didn't waste time debating whether we were serious. Within 6 hours, every functional spacecraft on Kethras III was lifting off, packed with refugees. Personal shuttles designed for 20 carrying 50. Cargo haulers with passengers strapped to every available surface. We watched on sensors as a steady stream of vessels fled the planet, heading for the safe corridor we'd designated. Some tried to run the other direction, toward Kethran military installations in neighboring systems. Those we intercepted. Not destroyed. We'd meant what we said about not killing civilians, but disabled and turned back. Our fighters would swoop in, precision shots taking out engines, then broadcast coordinates for the safe route and move on. It was mercy by our standards, though I doubted the Kethrans trapped in those dead ships saw it that way. The Kethran military tried to respond. 6 hours into the evacuation, a fleet arrived from Kethras Prime, 30 warships led by a heavy cruiser that dwarfed anything in our task force. They jumped in system broadcasting demands for our surrender, threats of overwhelming force, promises of annihilation if we didn't withdraw. Admiral Rodriguez's response was to order our stealth frigates forward. The Kethrans never saw them coming. One moment their fleet was arranging into battle formation, confident in their numerical advantage. The next, 12 silent killers materialized within weapons range and opened fire. Not with energy weapons they could track and counter, but with old-fashioned human ingenuity. Railgun slugs accelerated to a fraction of light speed, thousands of kinetic projectiles that turned their shields into Swiss cheese. The heavy cruiser died first, its entire forward section torn apart by a concentrated barrage that released more energy than a nuclear weapon. The other ships tried to scatter, tried to return fire, But our frigates were already gone, vanishing back into stealth while our main fleet advanced. It was a slaughter. Within 20 minutes, half the Kethran ships were disabled or destroyed. The rest fled, jumping out system in a panicked retreat. All Kethran vessels, Rodriguez broadcast on the heels of their defeat, have now witnessed what happens when you try to stop us. We came here for one purpose, to teach your species that human blood has a price. If you interfere again, you'll pay that price in full. If you let us complete our mission, your people live. Choose wisely. They chose survival. No more military fleets appeared. Instead, we watched as the Kethran government redirected resources to the evacuation, sending civilian transports from other colonies to help move their people. It was the smart play, and it told me something important. The Kethrans might be brutal, but they weren't suicidal. They were learning the lesson we'd come to teach. But not everyone was leaving. As the 48-hour mark approached, sensors showed approximately 50,000 Kethrans still on the surface. Some were in remote areas, unable to reach the spaceports in time. Others, according to the intercepted communications our intelligence team translated, were refusing to go. Diehards who thought we were bluffing, or idealists who believed their presence would stop us, or simply people too old or sick to endure the chaos of evacuation. Lieutenant Foster came to tactical as we entered the final hour. "Thomas," she said quietly, "there are still children down there, families who couldn't get out in time. If we go through with this, we give them 48 hours, I said, cutting her off. We kept our word. If their government couldn't organize a proper evacuation, that's on them, not us. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of it. 50,000 people about to have their world destroyed around them. Not all of them would die. The infrastructure strikes wouldn't directly target population centers, but some would. Accidents. Wrong place, wrong time. Collateral damage. Just like Terra Nova, a voice whispered in my head, except we'd given them a chance to leave. The counter hit 0. "All bomber wings, you are cleared to engage." Admiral Rodriguez's voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Target package Alpha, primary power generation facilities, precision strikes only, minimize collateral casualties." I watched on the tactical display as 200 bombers detached from our carriers, formed up in neat squadrons, and began their descent toward Kethras 3. They looked almost graceful on the sensors, like birds of prey circling before the kill. Each one carried enough ordnance to level a city block, but they weren't aiming for cities. Not yet. First came the power plants, the fusion reactors and solar arrays that kept 800,000 people's worth of civilization running. The Kethrans had maintained some fighter cover planet-side, and they scrambled to intercept. I counted 60 fighters rising to meet our bombers, pilots who'd chosen to stay behind either out of duty or stubborn courage. Our escort fighters engaged them immediately, and the orbital space above Kethras Thru erupted into a chaotic furball of dogfighting that sensors could barely track. "Fighter engagement," the tactical officer called out. "Our pilots are mixing it up with their defense squadrons. So far we're holding superiority, but wait, scratch that. Enemy fighters are breaking off. They're retreating." I pulled up the tactical feed and saw it myself. The Kethran fighters were disengaging, burning hard for the outer system. Not because they were losing, though they were, but because they'd realized the futility. 60 fighters couldn't stop 200 bombers backed by 300 escorts. They'd chosen to live and fight another day rather than die in a gesture of meaningless defiance. Smart. The Kethrans were brutal, but they weren't stupid. Without opposition, our bombers reached their targets. The first strike hit a massive fusion complex on the northern continent, the primary power source for the capital city. I watched the sensor feed as kinetic penetrators, tungsten rods accelerated to hypersonic speeds, punched through the reactor shielding like it was tissue paper. The fusion reaction didn't explode, not like a weapon. It just stopped, collapsed in on itself as the magnetic containment failed. The facility went dark, and with it, 3 million square kilometers of power grid. More strikes followed in rapid succession. Solar arrays shattered under railgun fire, hydroelectric dams blown apart by precision missiles. Geothermal plants sealed shut by collapsed tunnels. Within an hour, 90% of Kithras 3's power generation was offline. The cities went dark. Climate control systems failed. Communication networks crashed. Everything that required electricity, which was everything in a modern civilization, simply stopped working. Second wave launching, the tactical officer reported. Target package Bravo, water treatment and distribution. This was worse, somehow. Power you could live without, at least for a while. Water was life itself. The bombers swept across the planet, hitting the massive desalination plants that turned seawater into drinking water, the purification facilities that processed groundwater, the pumping stations that moved water through thousands of kilometers of pipeline. Each strike was surgical, precise, designed to destroy the machinery without contaminating the water supply itself. We weren't trying to poison them, just remove their ability to access clean water on an industrial scale. Lieutenant Foster had stayed in tactical, watching the whole thing unfold with an expression of horror and resignation. "They'll die of thirst," she said quietly. "Those 50,000 who stayed behind. Without water treatment, without power to run the pumps, they'll die in days." "They have 48 more hours to leave," I said, though the words tasted like ash. "We'll maintain the safe corridor, and there are natural water sources. Rivers, lakes. It'll be primitive, but survivable if they organize." I pulled up the intelligence assessment. The Kethran government is already broadcasting evacuation orders on emergency bands. They're sending more transports. She looked at me, and there was something broken in her eyes. "We're doing to them exactly what they did to us, making them choose between fleeing or dying." "No," I said, and I meant it. "What they did was give no warning, no choice, no chance. They hunted our people through the streets. We're destroying infrastructure, not lives. It's not the same thing." "Isn't it?" she asked. "Those 50,000 people down there, they're terrified. They're watching their world die around them. Some of them will die because they can't escape in time. How is that different from Terra Nova?" I wanted to give her a good answer, a clean answer that would make the moral distinction obvious, but the truth was messier. "The difference," I said slowly, "is that we're trying to avoid killing them. We gave them time. We're maintaining rescue corridors. If they die, it's because their own government failed to evacuate them, not because we hunted them down." I met her eyes. "And the other difference is that we're doing this to teach a lesson, not because we enjoy it. The Kethrans made a choice to massacre Terra Nova. We're making a choice to show them what that choice costs. If we don't, they'll do it again. And again. Until humanity is extinct or broken." She didn't respond, just turned back to watch the tactical display as the third wave of bombers launched. Target Package Charlie, agricultural production, the massive hydroponics facilities that fed millions, the genetic processing plants that optimized crop yields, the storage silos that held years of surplus food, all of it marked for destruction. The strikes were almost routine now. Bomber wings sweeping in, dropping their ordnance, pulling back to rearm. The surface of Kethras III lit up with secondary explosions as fuel stores caught fire, as chemical processing plants ruptured, as the infrastructure of modern civilization collapsed section by section. We were methodically killing a world without dropping a single bomb on a population center. It took 18 hours. 18 hours of continuous bombing runs to reduce Kethris III from a thriving colony to a barely habitable rock. When it was done, the planet still looked beautiful from orbit. Same blue oceans, same green continents. But appearances lied. Down there, in the darkness, 800,000 people's worth of civilization had been erased. No power, no water treatment, no food production. No medical facilities capable of anything beyond the most primitive care. No transportation network. No communications beyond short-range radio. The Kethrans who'd stayed behind, that 50,000 who'd been too slow or too stubborn to leave, were now trapped on a dying world. Some would make it to the evacuation ships that were still arriving, still desperately trying to pull people out. Others would die in the chaos, from accidents, from exposure, from the 100 small ways that civilization's collapse killed people. Admiral Rodriguez ordered a final broadcast. Kethrans of Kethras III, your world is no longer capable of sustaining your population. You have 72 hours to complete evacuation before we move to the next phase of infrastructure denial. Any vessels attempting to land with repair equipment or supplies will be turned back. This world is finished. Leave now while you still can. The message was brutal in its simplicity. We'd broken their civilization, and now we were forbidding them from fixing it. Kethras III would remain a dead world, a monument to the price of attacking humanity. But we weren't done. All ships, Rodriguez continued, prepare to jump to target designation 2, Kethras 7. We move in 6 hours. The pattern repeated itself across 16 worlds. Task Force 7 hit 4 of them, Kethras 3rd, 7th, X, and 14th. Each time it was the same dance. Jump in system. Broadcast the ultimatum. Wait 48 hours while desperate populations fled. Then systematically destroy everything that made modern life possible. Other task forces were doing the same across Kethran space. 16 simultaneous hammer blows that left millions of Kethrans homeless, billions in infrastructure damage, and the Concordate's economy in freefall. The Kethran military tried to stop us twice more. Both times they were defeated so thoroughly that the survivors fled rather than fight to the death. They were learning what it meant to face an opponent who'd been holding back for 6 decades, who'd spent that time preparing for exactly this scenario. Our weapons were better. Our tactics were sharper. Our will was unbreakable because we were fighting for something they'd taken from us. The simple right to exist without fear. By day 10 of Operation Reckoning, 12 of the 16 target worlds were devastated. The Galactic Council had called 17 emergency sessions, each one filled with condemnations of human aggression, demands that we cease hostilities, threats of intervention. We ignored them all. The Volturi Collective mobilized their fleet, posturing at their borders but not willing to actually engage. The Seolian Empire recalled all their diplomats from Earth. The smaller species that had spent 60 years looking down on humanity suddenly remembered why they'd been afraid of us in the first place. And the Kethrans, they were breaking. Intelligence reports showed their government in chaos, economic projections showing collapse within months, and most importantly, a growing movement among their civilian population demanding surrender. They were learning the lesson we'd come to teach. Human blood had a price, and they couldn't afford to pay it. On day 12, as we prepared to jump to target 15, the message came through on all frequencies. A transmission from Kethra Prime, from the Concordate's High Commander himself. He appeared on screen, and for the first time I saw a Kethran look defeated. His predatory features were drawn, his posture submissive rather than dominant. "To the human fleet," he began, and the translator captured the exhaustion in his voice. "The Kethran Concordate requests immediate ceasefire negotiations. We acknowledge our actions against Terra Nova were unjustified. We are prepared to discuss terms of reparation and accountability. Please halt your assault so that we may speak." Admiral Rodriguez studied the transmission for a long moment. Then she opened a fleet-wide channel. "All task forces, hold position. Weapons remain hot, but do not engage new targets unless fired upon." She switched to the diplomatic channel. "We will hear your terms. But understand this. We are not stopping out of mercy. We're stopping to see if you've learned anything. If these negotiations fail, if we believe you're stalling, we will finish what we started. The last 4 worlds on our list will burn just like the first 12. She cut the transmission and looked around the bridge. "Get me command on Earth, and someone wake up our diplomatic corps. It's time to see if the Kethrans have finally figured out what we've been trying to tell the galaxy for 60 years. "What's that, ma'am?" the communications officer asked. "That humanity isn't interested in being your victim," Rodriguez said. "We'll be your partners. We'll be your allies. We'll even be your friends. But if you make us your enemy, you'll learn exactly why we dominated our own world so completely before we ever reached the stars." The negotiations took place on neutral ground, a Volturi diplomatic station orbiting a dead moon in unclaimed space. Both sides arrived with enough firepower to reduce the station to atoms, fleets bristling with weapons held in an uneasy ceasefire. The human delegation consisted of Admiral Rodriguez, 3 diplomatic specialists, and a security detail that included me. I'd been pulled from tactical to serve as military liaison, probably because I'd been vocal about maintaining pressure on the Kethrans even during talks. The station itself was a monument to Volturi architecture, all sweeping curves and organic shapes that looked grown rather than built. It was designed to feel peaceful, to encourage cooperation. But nothing could hide the tension as our shuttle docked, and we made our way to the central conference chamber. Every human in that delegation was thinking about Terra Nova, about 16,000 people who'd never get to sit at a negotiating table because they were ash and memory. The Kethrans were already there when we arrived. 5 of them, led by High Commander Vrekesh, the same one who'd appeared in the surrender transmission. Up close, the Kethran physiology was even more striking. Nearly 7 feet tall, covered in short fur that ranged from gold to deep amber, with eyes that tracked movement with predatory precision. They were evolved hunters, and every instinct in my human hindbrain recognized them as dangerous. But they looked diminished now, defeated. Vrekesh's posture was submissive by Kethran standards, shoulders down, head slightly bowed. The other 4 members of his delegation looked even worse, their fur unkempt, their movements jittery with exhaustion. They'd spent 2 weeks watching their civilization crumble while being powerless to stop it. "Humans," Vrekesh began, and the translator rendered his growling language into flat English. "We acknowledge that we have wronged you. The attack on Terra Nova was a violation of galactic law and common decency. We offer formal apology and request terms for reparation." Admiral Rodriguez sat down across from him, her expression carved from stone. "Apology, that's interesting. 2 weeks ago, your government called Terra Nova a regrettable incident and offered to investigate your own people. Now, after we've destroyed 12 of your worlds, suddenly it's a violation, and you're sorry." She leaned forward. "So which is it? Are you actually sorry? Or are you just sorry that you're losing?" The translator must have captured her tone perfectly, because Vrekesh flinched. One of his subordinates started to speak, probably to defend their position, but Vrekesh silenced him with a gesture. "We are sorry," he said, "because we finally understand what we did. When we attacked Terra Nova, we saw it as removing a threat. Humans have always frightened us. Your history, your capacity for violence, the speed at which you develop weapons. We saw you as a danger that needed to be managed. So you murdered our civilians to manage us," Rodriguez said coldly. "Yes," Vrekesh admitted. and at least he didn't try to justify it. We thought you would accept the council's judgment, file protests, eventually forget. We thought you had been domesticated by 60 years of peace. He met Rodriguez's eyes. We were wrong. We did not domesticate you. We merely taught you to hide what you are. And when we killed your people, you showed us the truth. You are not the greatest threat in the galaxy. You are the greatest threat in any galaxy. There was silence in the chamber. The Volturi observer, a floating jellyfish-like creature in a containment sphere, pulsed nervously. This wasn't how diplomatic negotiations usually went. There was supposed to be posturing, face-saving language, careful dances around the truth. Instead, Vrekesh was laying it out, raw and honest. 12 worlds, he continued. Millions of our people displaced, our economy collapsing, our military shattered in every engagement. And you did this in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to break us so completely that our own citizens are calling for my execution if I don't secure peace. He paused. We finally understand what you were trying to tell us for 60 years. You were not weak, you were being kind, and we mistook your kindness for weakness. One of the human diplomats, a woman named Helen Ortega, spoke up. The Kethran Concordat is prepared to accept full responsibility for Terra Nova? Yes, Vrekesh said. We will provide full financial reparations to the families of the deceased. We will turn over all personnel involved in the attack for human justice. We will accept whatever territorial concessions you demand. And we will sign a non-aggression pact that makes clear any future attack on human interests will be considered an act of war, justifying total retaliation. That's not enough, I said, and everyone turned to look at me. I probably should have stayed quiet. I was just there as military liaison, but I couldn't let it go. You think paying money and handing over a few officers makes this right? 16,000 people are dead. 12 of your worlds are devastated. We're sitting here negotiating while millions of your civilians are living in refugee camps. How does any of that balance? Vrekesh looked at me, and there was something in his predatory eyes that might have been respect. It doesn't, he said simply. There is no balance. No reparation that brings back your dead or rebuilds our worlds. But this is how wars end between civilized species, not with total annihilation, but with acknowledgement and consequences, and the hope that the pain we've inflicted on each other is enough to prevent it from happening again. Is it? I challenged. Enough pain? Because from where I'm sitting, you attacked us because you thought we were weak. Now you know we're not. But what happens in 20 years, or 50, when you've rebuilt? When some other Kethran commander decides that humanity is still a threat that needs managing. That's why we're proposing the verification protocols, one of the other Kethrans spoke up. A female whose translator badge identified her as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Permanent human observers on all Kethran military installations. Real-time access to our strategic planning. Your people will see any threat before it develops. Admiral Rodriguez studied them. You're offering to let us spy on your military, openly? We're offering to be transparent, the minister said, because the alternative is that you don't trust us, and eventually you decide that unfinished business needs finishing. You have 4 worlds left on your target list. You have the capacity to destroy Kethra Prime itself. We know this. Our analysts have run every scenario, and in each one where we remain adversaries, the Kethran Concordat ceases to exist within a generation. So we're choosing survival. We're choosing to become your ally instead of your victim. It was pragmatic in a way I had to respect. They weren't appealing to our mercy or our morality. They were acknowledging the raw calculus of power. Humanity had proven we could destroy them, so they were offering us something more valuable than their destruction. Their cooperation. Helen Ortega pulled up a document on her tablet. We have draft terms prepared. In addition to what you've mentioned, humanity requires the following. First, Kethran withdrawal from 6 disputed systems along our shared border. Second, technology transfer for your FTL drive systems and energy shielding. Third, a formal declaration before the Galactic Council accepting full responsibility for Terra Nova and acknowledging humanity's right to self-defense through any means necessary. That last one, Vrakesh said carefully, will change how the entire galaxy views humanity. The Council has spent 60 years maintaining that you're a dangerous species that needs oversight. If we formally acknowledge your right to unrestricted self-defense, we're saying that oversight failed, that you're not the threat. Those who provoke you are. Exactly, Rodriguez said. We're done being treated like criminals on parole. This is your chance to rewrite the narrative. Tell the galaxy that humanity isn't the monster they feared. We're just the species you really don't want to cross. The Kethrans conferred among themselves in their own language, a series of growls and chirps that the translator didn't bother rendering. Finally, Vrakesh turned back. We agree to all terms. We will prepare the formal documents for signing within 72 hours. But we have one request in return. Go ahead, Rodriguez said warily. Help us, Vrakesh said, and there was genuine desperation in his translated voice. The 12 worlds you devastated. Our people are dying in refugee camps. Disease is spreading. Our logistics networks can't handle millions of displaced civilians. If you want to prove that you're not the monsters we feared, help us save the people your attack displaced. The silence stretched out. It was a brilliant move, really. If we refused, we proved we were exactly what the galaxy feared: merciless destroyers. If we agreed, we demonstrated that our attack had been about justice, not genocide. But it also meant committing human resources, human medicine, human personnel to save Kethran lives. After Terra Nova, that would be a hard sell to our own people. Admiral Rodriguez looked at our delegation. Helen Ortega nodded slightly. The other diplomats showed varying degrees of reluctance, but no outright opposition. Finally, Rodriguez turned back to Vrakesh. We'll send humanitarian aid, medical supplies, temporary housing, food, but it comes with conditions. Human personnel will distribute it directly. No Kethran military within 100 kilometers of the aid zones. And every refugee who receives our help will know that humans gave it to them, that the species you tried to destroy showed more mercy than your own government. Agreed, Vrakesh said immediately. We will publicize human aid extensively. Let our people see that you are better than we were. One more thing, I said, and this time Rodriguez didn't stop me. The personnel who carried out the Terra Nova massacre. We want all of them. Every ship captain, every pilot, every soldier who set foot on that colony. They stand trial on Earth under human law. No exceptions. Vrekesh's expression was pained. Some of them are high-ranking officers, heroes of our previous campaigns. Turning them over will be unpopular. I don't care, I said flatly. 16,000 people died. Someone pays for that. Either you turn over the perpetrators, or we finish this conversation by finishing your last 4 worlds and moving on to Kethra Prime. Choose. Vrakesh looked at me for a long moment, and I watched something die behind his predatory eyes. Pride, maybe. Or the last illusion that this negotiation was between equals, rather than between conqueror and conquered. We will turn them over, he said finally. All 347 personnel who participated in the Terra Nova operation. They will be transported to Earth within 30 days for trial under your jurisdiction. 347. I'd known intellectually that it took more than a handful of people to massacre 16,000 civilians. But hearing the actual number made it real. 347 Kethrans who'd followed orders, pulled triggers, fired weapons, and turned a human colony into a morgue. Some of them probably believed they were doing the right thing, protecting their species from the dangerous humans. Some probably enjoyed it. All of them would face human justice now. There's something else we need to discuss, Helen Ortega said, pulling up another document. The other species, the Volturi, the Seolians, the rest of the Galactic Council. They've been issuing condemnations of human actions for 2 weeks straight, calling us warmongers, demanding we submit to Council authority, threatening sanctions. When we sign this treaty, when you publicly acknowledge that you provoked this war and humanity's response was justified, there's going to be backlash. Are you prepared for that? The Kethran Minister of Foreign Affairs leaned forward. The Council is afraid, she said bluntly. They're afraid because you've demonstrated capabilities they didn't know you possessed. You've broken one of the galaxy's major powers in 2 weeks, using weapons and tactics that none of our intelligence predicted. The stealth ships, the drone swarms, the AI-assisted targeting systems that every treaty prohibited. You had them all along, didn't you? Hidden away, waiting. Admiral Rodriguez didn't confirm or deny. What's your point? My point is that the Council will try to bring you to heel, the minister said. They'll argue that the Kethran Concordate's acknowledgement was made under duress, that humanity violated galactic law, that you need to be sanctioned or contained. They'll try to rebuild the cage they kept you in for 60 years. Let them try, Rodriguez said coldly. We're done asking permission to exist. If the Council wants to fight about it, they can join the Kethrans in learning what happens when you push humanity too far. That's what we're afraid of, Rakesh said quietly. Not for ourselves, we've already learned that lesson. But if you go to war with the entire Galactic Council, millions will die, perhaps billions. Your species has proven it can win any war it chooses to fight, but at what cost? How much blood are you willing to spill to prove your point? It was a fair question, and one that had been eating at me since Operation Reckoning began. We'd devastated 12 worlds to avenge one. 347 Kethrans would stand trial for 16,000 human deaths. Millions of Kethran refugees were living in camps because we'd destroyed their homes. The math was brutal and asymmetric, and I couldn't quite convince myself that it balanced on any scale that mattered. But then I thought about the alternative, accepting the Council's judgment, watching the Kethrans face minor sanctions while our dead stayed dead, teaching the galaxy that human lives were cheap, that we could be killed without serious consequences. That path led to more Terra Novas, more massacres, until humanity was either extinct or so brutalized that we became what the galaxy had always feared, genocidal monsters with nothing left to lose. We'll spill whatever blood we have to, I heard myself say. Not because we want to, because you've left us no choice. For 60 years we played by the Council's rules. We disarmed. We submitted to inspections. We proved over and over that we could be trusted. And the moment we showed any weakness, the Kethran struck. If we back down now, if we let the Council dictate terms, we're just inviting the next attack. Helen Ortega was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Commander Webb isn't wrong, she said slowly. Humanity's position in the galaxy has fundamentally changed. We can't go back to being the species that begs for acceptance. But we also can't afford to be at war with everyone. We need allies. You want us to be those allies, Rakesh said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Rodriguez confirmed. Here's what we're proposing. The Kethran Concordate signs this treaty, accepts responsibility for Terra Nova, and commits to full transparency with human oversight. In return, we provide humanitarian aid to your refugees. We help rebuild your devastated worlds, and we enter into a mutual defense pact. If anyone attacks the Kethrans, they're attacking humanity's ally. And if anyone attacks humanity... She smiled without humor. Well, you've seen what we do to our enemies. The implications were staggering. We weren't just ending a war. We were forging an alliance with the species we'd just defeated, turning the Kethrans from adversaries into partners, backed by human military might. It would fundamentally reshape galactic politics overnight. The Council will see this as a threat, the Kethran minister said. 2 of the galaxy's most militarily powerful species, allied together, both angry at how the Council has treated them. They'll try to break this alliance before it forms. Then they'll fail, Rodriguez said, because we're not asking for council approval. We're informing them of reality. The Kethran-Human alliance starts the moment we sign this treaty. If the Volturi or Seolians want to test it, they're welcome to try. We have 450 ships in the field and production capacity to double that within 6 months. The Kethrans, even battered as they are, still field 200 warships. Together, we're the largest military force in this sector of the galaxy. Vrekesh was silent for a long moment, his predator's mind clearly running calculations. You're proposing we abandon the Council entirely, step outside the political structure that's maintained galactic peace for 3 centuries. What peace? I interjected. The peace that let you massacre 16,000 civilians? The peace that treats humanity like dangerous children who can't be trusted? That's not peace. That's subjugation dressed up in diplomatic language. Commander Webb is passionate, Helen Ortega said diplomatically, but he's not wrong. The current galactic order is built on the assumption that humanity can be controlled, and the Kethrans can police their own worst instincts. Terra Nova proved both assumptions false, so we're building a new order. One where humanity and the Kethrans work together, where our combined strength ensures that neither of us can be attacked with impunity, and where the Council has to accept us as equals rather than problems to be managed. The Kethran delegation conferred again, longer this time. I watched them debate in their own language, saw the gestures that I'd learned meant disagreement, concern, and eventually reluctant acceptance. When they turned back, Vrekesh looked older, more worn. We agree, he said. The Kethran Concordat will enter into full alliance with humanity. We will stand together against council pressure. We will rebuild our relationship from enemies to partners. He paused. But understand what you're asking of us. My people's pride has already been shattered. Now you're asking us to publicly ally with the species that broke us. There will be resistance. There may even be violence from Kethrans who see this as ultimate humiliation. Then you deal with that resistance, Rodriguez said without sympathy. Because the alternative is we finish what we started. 4 more worlds destroyed, then Kethra Prime, then the complete dismantling of the Kethran Concordat. Your choice is between wounded pride and extinction. That's not a choice, Vrekesh said bitterly. That's surrender. Yes, Rodriguez agreed. It is. You attacked us. You lost. This is what losing looks like. But here's what makes us different from you. We're offering you a path forward. We're not demanding your extinction or permanent subjugation. We're saying, learn from this, change, become our partner, and together we'll make sure nothing like Terra Nova ever happens again. To either of our species. The Volturi observer finally spoke, its translated voice like wind chimes. The Council will need to approve any such alliance. Galactic law requires... We don't care what galactic law requires, I cut it off. You're observing these negotiations as a courtesy, not because we need your permission. When we're done here, you can report back to the Council that humanity and the Kethrans are allied. They can deal with it however they want. The Volturi pulsed an angry red, but didn't respond. It had no authority here except what we granted it, and we just made clear that was exactly nothing. Helen Ortega pulled up the final treaty documents. These are the terms, as we've discussed. Full Kethran responsibility for Terra Nova, reparations to victim families, transfer of all perpetrators to human custody. Technology sharing, territorial concessions, transparency protocols, and mutual defense alliance. Sign this, and we begin the process of turning our species from enemies into partners. Vrekesh looked at the documents for a long time. I wondered what was going through his mind. 2 weeks ago, he'd been the high commander of a powerful galactic nation. Now he was signing away his people's sovereignty, turning over war criminals, accepting human oversight, and allying with the species that had humiliated his military and devastated his worlds. History would judge him either as the leader who saved the Kethran Concordat from extinction or as the coward who surrendered to human aggression. But he signed. All 5 Kethrans did, their clawed hands inscribing signatures in their own script below the treaty terms. Then Admiral Rodriguez signed for humanity, followed by Helen Ortega and the other diplomats. I signed as military witness, my hand steady even as I felt the weight of what we'd just done. The war was over. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never look at us the same way again. "There's one more thing," Vrakesh said as we prepared to leave. "A question I need answered, not for the treaty, but for my own understanding." "Go ahead," Rodriguez said. "Would you have done it?" he asked. "If we hadn't surrendered, if we'd refused to negotiate, would you have destroyed all 16 worlds? Would you have attacked Kethra Prime itself? Would you have committed actual genocide to make your point?" Admiral Rodriguez met his eyes. "We'll never know," she said, "because you were smart enough not to find out." 6 months later, I stood on the surface of Kethras III and watched human engineers working alongside Kethran laborers to rebuild a power generation facility. The planet still looked wounded: empty cities, overgrown fields, infrastructure in various states of reconstruction. But life was returning. Slowly. Painfully. The refugees were coming back, trickling in from the camps we'd helped establish on other worlds, finding their homes destroyed but not gone. Not completely. I'd volunteered for the reconstruction assignment, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just needed to see the consequences of what we'd done with my own eyes instead of through tactical displays and intelligence reports. Whatever the reason, I'd spent the past 4 months on Kethras III, coordinating human aid efforts and learning to work with a species that had every reason to hate us. The relationship was complicated. The Kethrans who'd returned were grateful for the aid. Human medicine had saved thousands of lives during the refugee crisis. Human food shipments had prevented mass starvation. Human engineers were rebuilding faster than Kethran resources alone could have managed. But beneath the gratitude was resentment, humiliation, the bitter taste of defeat. They knew we'd destroyed their world. They knew we could have killed them all and chose not to. That we'd shown mercy made it worse somehow, made the power imbalance impossible to ignore. "Commander Webb," a voice called out. I turned to see Theron, one of the Kethran liaisons I'd been working with. He was young for his species, maybe equivalent to a human in his late 20s, and he'd lost his entire family in the evacuation, not killed by our attacks, but trampled in the panic at a spaceport. He had every reason to hate me, but somehow we'd developed something close to professional respect. "The central reactor is online. Power should reach the southern districts by nightfall." "Good work," I said, and meant it. The Kethrans were resilient, I'd give them that. 6 months ago, this world was a devastated shell. Now it had partial power, functional water treatment in 3 cities, and agricultural production at about 30% of pre-war levels. Still a long way from fully recovered, but surviving. That counted for something. Theron stood beside me, looking out over the construction site. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "What your people did here?" I'd been asked that question 100 times in 100 different ways over the past 6 months. By Kethrans, by human personnel struggling with what we'd done, by journalists covering the reconstruction, by my own reflection in the mirror at night. "Every day," I said honestly. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your government put us in a position where this was the only response that would be taken seriously. But no, I don't regret that we did it, because the alternative was accepting that human lives don't matter, that we can be massacred without consequences." "Terra Nova?" Theron said. It wasn't a question. Every conversation eventually came back to Terra Nova, the wound that had started this whole nightmare. 16,000 people, I said. 16,000 civilians who did nothing wrong except be human on a colony world. Your military killed them deliberately, systematically, children in schools, families in their homes, and your government's first response was to call it regrettable and promise an investigation. I looked at him. What would your people have done if we'd killed 800,000 Kethrans on one of your worlds? Would you have accepted an investigation? Theron was quiet for a long moment. No, he admitted. We would have declared total war. We would have demanded blood for blood until one of our species was extinct. He laughed bitterly. Which makes you more merciful than us. You destroyed our infrastructure but spared our lives. Given you the chance, we would have committed genocide. That's why we're different, I said. And why this alliance might actually work. You understand strength, you respect power, but you're learning that humanity's strength isn't just in our weapons, it's in our ability to choose when to use them and when to hold back. A human engineer approached, a woman named Lieutenant Sandra Briggs, who'd been overseeing the reactor installation. Commander, we're getting reports from the northern continent. Some kind of disturbance in New Kethra City. Sounds like a protest that's turning violent. I pulled up my comm unit and patched into the security feed. The images showed hundreds of Kethrans gathered in what had been the city's central plaza, their voices raised in what the translator struggled to render, but my linguistic training recognized as anger. Signs were being waved, some in Kethran script, some in crudely written English. The ones I could read said things like, "Human occupiers go home," and "Kethran pride not for sale," and "Death before alliance." How bad? I asked Briggs. So far just property damage, broken windows, some fires. But the crowd's growing and local security forces are pulling back. They're asking if we should deploy human peacekeepers. I shook my head. No human forces. This needs to be handled by Kethrans. If we show up in force, we prove their point, that we're occupiers, not allies. I switched channels. Get me Minister Carvin. The Kethran Minister of Reconstruction appeared on my screen a moment later, her fur disheveled with stress. Commander Webb, I'm aware of the situation in New Kethra. We're mobilizing security forces now. Don't just disperse them, I said. Let them protest. They have legitimate grievances. Half their world is destroyed because of a war their government started. Let them be angry. They're calling for violence against human personnel, Carvin said. If this spreads, your people could be at risk. Then we'll evacuate if necessary, I said. But we're not going to suppress them. You want to know the difference between human occupation and human partnership? We don't silence dissent. We let people be angry, let them process their trauma, and we prove through actions that we're here to help, not control. Carvin looked at me like I was insane. You would risk your people's safety for Kethran political theater? It's not theater, I said. It's democracy. It's freedom of expression. It's everything we've been trying to teach the galaxy we believe in. If we can't handle some angry protesters, how are we any better than the authoritarian system that made the Galactic Council possible? The protest continued for 3 days. It grew to thousands, spread to other cities, and became a genuine political movement demanding answers from the Kethran government. Why had they attacked Terra Nova? Why had they surrendered so quickly? Why were they accepting human aid with human conditions attached? The questions were valid, and watching the Kethran government struggle to answer them was fascinating and painful. On the 4th day, High Commander Vrekesh himself arrived on Kethras III to address the protesters. I watched from a distance as he stood before thousands of angry citizens and did something unprecedented in Kethran politics. He apologized. Not the diplomatic non-apology that governments usually offered, but a real, raw admission of failure. We attacked Terra Nova because we were afraid, Vrekish told his people. Afraid of human power, afraid of human potential, afraid that they would surpass us and make us irrelevant. So we tried to break them, to show them and the galaxy that humanity could be struck with impunity. We were wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. And you, all of you, paid the price for our mistake. Your homes destroyed, your families displaced, your pride shattered. You have every right to be angry, every right to demand answers. The crowd was silent, stunned by the admission. Kethran leaders didn't apologize, didn't admit weakness. Vrekish was violating every norm of his culture by standing there and accepting responsibility. The alliance with humanity isn't surrender, he continued. It's survival. It's recognition that the old ways, the ways of dominance and violence and subjugating the weak, don't work anymore. Humanity proved that. They broke us in 2 weeks because they're better at war than we ever imagined. But then they stopped. They offered terms. They provided aid. They're rebuilding our worlds when they could have left us to die. That's not weakness. That's strength we don't understand yet. A voice from the crowd shouted something the translator rendered as, "They destroyed our world." Yes, Vrekish agreed. They did. Because we destroyed theirs first. Because we murdered 16,000 of their people and thought they would accept it. We miscalculated so badly that we nearly brought extinction to our species. And now we have a choice. We can cling to our pride, reject human aid, refuse the alliance, and face the galaxy alone, weakened, devastated, vulnerable to any species that wants to finish what humanity started. Or we can adapt. We can learn from this defeat. We can become partners with the species that proved themselves stronger, and together build something new. I found myself moved by the speech despite everything. Vrekish was asking his people to do something incredibly difficult, to swallow their pride, accept their defeat, and work with their conquerors. It was the kind of cultural transformation that usually took generations. He was trying to force it in months. The protest didn't end that day, but it changed. The anger became more focused, directed at the old government that had started the war, rather than the humans helping rebuild. Political movements formed demanding reform, transparency, and a voice in how the Kethran-human alliance would function. It was messy and chaotic and occasionally violent, but it was also the birth of something new. A Kethran culture learning to question authority, demand accountability, and find strength in vulnerability. 3 weeks later, I received orders to return to Earth. My tour on Kethras III was complete, and I was being reassigned to the new Joint Defense Command, the combined human-Kethran military headquarters being established on a neutral station. Before I left, Theron found me packing my gear. "You're leaving," he said. "Yeah, new assignment." "Will you come back?" I considered the question. "Probably. If the alliance works, there will be a lot of exchange between our species. Cultural programs, military cooperation, joint scientific projects." "This is just the beginning." "Thomas," he said, using my first name for the first time, "what your people did here, destroying our world, do you think we'll ever forgive that?" I met his eyes. "I don't know, maybe not. But maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe the point is learning to work together despite the history, building something better than what came before. Your people killed 16,000 of mine. My people devastated 12 of your worlds. Neither of us can undo that, but we can choose what comes next." He extended his hand in the human gesture he'd learned. "Then I hope what comes next is better than what came before." I shook his hand, feeling the alien strength in his grip. "So do I."